Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Rolling Forward podcast. I am here with Alex, appearance part 3. So, I'm super excited for this episode. This is not going to be a conventional episode. I think we're going to make Alex a regular appearance every couple months, something like that. And we're just going to talk about life and what keeps us rolling forward and just kind of give everybody a life update. One of the few things that we'll talk about is Alex writing a couple books. We're going to talk about sobriety. We're going to talk about my health issues, and a bunch of other things that I am not thinking about right now. But anyway, the first question that we have planned is, how would you describe me as a stranger? So, Alex, I'll let you go first, and then I'll answer for you.
Okay. This is interesting. I definitely haven't thought about this 5 minutes ago. Um,
by, by the way, we always seem to have technical difficulties, so we recorded for like 5-10 minutes before this, and we're trying it again. So hopefully it turns out okay.
I mean, I really liked my answer last time, so I'll just kind of stick with it. Um, your sense of humor, I think, is the first thing that comes to mind. Fiercely loyal. Like, I feel like once you have you as a friend, you kind of have a friend for life. And then, what were the other things I said? I mean, just really intelligent. Like, you're very well versed in a lot of different topics, and you don't really bullshit, which I think is something that I didn't mention before, but that is something that I do appreciate about you. And I think that, like, if you speak about something, it's something that you know about. And then the sternness and like being able to set clear boundaries. That's my answer again, and I'm gonna stick with it.
I like it. One tangent that I kind of went on is that sternness. I think, it's a blessing and a curse. It's one thing that I think, sometimes I might cross over the line a little bit too much with some people, but other people I think appreciate it and want that candid, let's say, bluntness. And yeah, I think that can be a good thing, but I'm working on like how to deliver it and when to deliver it. So, um, anyway,
I
I
was
would
thinking
describe you.
about
Go
that.
ahead. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier when you said it, and I guess it's like having the ability to read the room, to
Yeah.
know when and how to deliver the sternness. Because I think, like, especially like between the two of us, like, I really appreciate when you just call me out on my shit, right? Like, I don't need a lot of yes sayers in my life, and I don't need a lot of people that like coddle me with the truth. I appreciate people that just tell me how it is. And sometimes that does hurt. And sometimes the immediate reaction is like, I don't want to listen to this. But then like the reflection starts and you're like, there's some truth there actually.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because I think you're kind of the same way. Like I've told you things that I knew deliberately going to you, I wouldn't want to hear your answer. And I've needed, I've needed to hear the answer that you provide. So it goes both ways. And I think it's a really valuable friendship to have when you can just be brutally honest with each other and don't take it to heart because you know that the other person just wants to make you better.
Yeah, like we say it with love, but it's not always super loving. And I can
Yeah.
think of like five conversations that we've had off the top of my head where you preface is like, I don't want to ask you this, but like I need your opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I guess that's one way to describe you. I think I could be wrong in this because I don't give, I mean, I guess I give my own, myself internal feedback, but it's not received in the same way. I think you give hard feedback more delicately, let's say. But then again, I don't know. Thinking back on a couple conversations, like the maybe not. I don't know. It doesn't matter who does it
In
better or
German,
who
we
does it
say
worse or whatever.
Taktgefühl, and essentially it's just like knowing the rhythm of a conversation. Sometimes
Yeah,
a hard delivery is necessary. Like, there was an instance with a friend of mine where he was doing some like self-harm behavior, and I had to like when he told me, like I had to just be like, stop it, just outright. And then like it was very clear and direct, like just stop that. And it was weird too because I found the SNL skit much later on in life where he told me that like the next time he tried to do it, he heard my voice saying stop it and he didn't do it
yeah,
again. But like
yeah,
sometimes like there's a little bit, I don't know if delicate's the right word, but like when someone's beating themselves down about something already, they don't need another punch to the gut.
yeah. It's interesting because I think I would describe you as like someone who is disciplined with the things that you set your mind to. I think you're a dreamer as well, and we kind of talked about that as far as you being an artist, and um, you have this creative outlet, and you have all these things that you want to do, and you think really big. You're also, and I think people will find out from this conversation is you're a very deep thinker. And I think beyond that, like when I propose something to you, like you have thoughts that are just like completely different the uh, from what let's say a normal person would think. Okay, we're back, everybody. We were talking about being blunt, and then
Yeah.
so I think how I would describe you is I mean you're an artist, so you have your mind on a lot of different things. You're very disciplined in the things that you want to do. I think sobriety is one of those things that has come top of mind when I think discipline. Um and you're a very creative person, very deep thinker. That's what we were talking about before. We were talking about how you ask questions that are unlike
Yeah.
any other person that I come into contact with. And that's super cool because it's just a different perspective that it's like, oh, I've never thought of that.
It's interesting because I guess for me, I've had my brain and my mind my whole life. So to me, they seem like
Yeah.
extremely normal questions. Like,
Yeah.
like this is what everybody thinks, right?
Right. And they're not. I think it's cool because like it challenges a different thought process. And that's why our conversations, like we've had calls like outside of podcasts, and we could seriously talk for 8 hours, and after the 8 hours still have things that we could talk about. So it's cool the the depth that you have, I guess. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think that, and we talked about this now twice in both attempts to record, but like I want so much out of life that it's hard to like obtain and maintain that bar. I have so
Yeah.
many diverse interests, and this is also a problem that like, yeah, I do a lot of things when I set my mind to it, but there's still so many unfinished projects that I have, just because I'm constantly inspired by things that are around me or things that I interact with or come across to just create more content. And
Yeah.
following through in the sea of ideas and like this ocean of ideas to then just be like, okay, let me dedicate all the time it takes to really follow through and finish something. That needs its own dedication and consistency more so than anything else. And
Yeah,
my ADHD
sure
brain will
does.
then just be like, well, actually, let's just make an album, you know? And then it's like, oh,
Yeah,
well, like, what if we write a book? Oh, how about we make a tabletop role playing game? Like,
yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, and it's kind of cool, like the things that you've gotten into in life as a result of like I don't know, I guess squirreling. Like you were into doing D&D as a dungeon master for a while,
still do
and
that.
you do. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. We're actually gonna have another session next Wednesday for my birthday. So June
Yeah.
10th, whenever this podcast comes out,
Okay.
probably be after that. Um, yeah, so
Do you
whenever I'm
do a
running a
lot?
campaign,
Do you post that stuff?
no, we try to do it once. The people that I'm playing with now were still rather new, and so there was a lot of time being eaten up by this like figuring out the mechanics of everything. Um, and there is like this degree of like, yeah, everything is content, but does everything need to be content? Because there's so much joy and fun that I have in these things, and sometimes like hobbies can just be hobbies. Like
Yeah.
there's part of me that would love to be a famous DM like Matt Mercer or Brandon Lee Mulligan and just go around doing D&D all the time as a DM. But there's also just a much larger part of me that really enjoys spending quality time with my friends where we're just engaging in a story and cracking jokes and having fun. And those don't have to be mutually exclusive, but like there is a degree of also like, yeah, let's just have fun as friends, spending like a time together. And so anytime I'm running a
Yeah.
campaign on my birthday, I do like a dungeon where the players go through like a series of like challenges and quizzes and puzzles and traps and things. And at the end, it's a free for all where a wish can be obtained by whoever gets the wish. It's kind of like a snitch usually flying around the room that they have to like grab and they have to like fight each other for the wish or like NPCs because the NPCs, usually villains, are also fighting for it and
Cool.
it's just become a kind of tradition that whenever I'm running a campaign on my birthday, there's a wish dungeon. So that's going to be next Wednesday.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Um okay, so I think we covered that question. I guess catch me up to where you've been since the last episode. Well, I guess really the last episode you interviewed me. So
Yeah.
it doesn't really count for it's probably been what like 6 to 8 months since your last episode came out about you.
Yeah, life's been really great is what I'd love to say. Um, so where to begin? I think like when we did the episode about me, I was in a very hopeful state. And I think based on some of the questions that we talked about earlier, like a lot of this will kind of go through as we talk more in this podcast. But the synopsis style is, yeah, still sober, going on like 19 months now. That's been great. Got a job, tried to get fired at the job because I hated it, kept getting promoted, finally got fired from the job. Was quite elated, honestly, because I did not like that job at all. And then my uncle passed away during a routine surgery. There was complications. My cousin got diagnosed with cancer. The girl I was dating cheated on me. Um, yeah, life kind of just kept kicking me in the dick for for a couple months straight. I fell into like pretty heavy depression and then slowly just climbing out of that hole. Just, I mean, I wish it was more glamorous. I think this is what also started me start like the how do I even say this? Like the journey of wanting to write a book because I've been working on like a franchise kind of thing for a couple years. But like this book that I'm writing right now is a lot more personal and existential, maybe a degree philosophical. And it was just me kind of dealing with grief, loss, pain in some sort of cathartic way. And I think that's what creativity and creation has been for me. Most of my life has been just the processing of stuff that's happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So last podcast, you didn't really get into sobriety a whole lot. Do we want to kick off like our first topic with that, or are you thinking we should do something a little lighter?
I mean, we're already skirting the topic. We might as well dive in. I feel like I'm uniquely
Yeah.
qualified to talk about this.
Yeah. So what I want to do is take me back before you got sober. Um, and can you just describe like what what was happening in
How
your
far
life?
how
What were
far back
you?
do we want to go? Um, I mean, I guess I'll give you the whole spiel, right? Um,
Yeah.
I was an alcoholic and addict way before any of that was introduced into my life. For me, was rooted in escapism, right? And that could have been a book, that could have been video games, that could have been TV, that could have been to a degree sports, physical exercise, anything that took me out of my body and moment, right? Like my biggest problem was Alexander, and there's a degree of self-loathing, there's a degree of feeling outcast or uncomfortable in groups. The first time I ever drank alcohol, family party, family in Germany. Germany, alcohol is quite socially acceptable, and they have something called like Kinderbier in Bavaria, which is kids beer. It's basically just beer with some Coca-Cola. And so at like 12, I remember getting this big mug of it, and I spent the whole night just trying to get more of it, drinking half, being like, hey, can you top me off? Being like, hey, I lost my glass. Can you give me another one? Just figuring out all these different ways to try and get more, because the moment I took a sip, I felt warm. I felt like complete. I felt present. There was like all these feelings of fear and anxiety just kind of melted away. And I was like, whatever this is, I want a whole lot of it. And so that then
Interesting. And it
it
does
kind
have
of tapered
alcohol
off.
in it. Those kid
Yeah, it's straight up beer. It's straight
those
up beer. It's this 50-50 mix. They're just like, it's a kid's beer.
interesting
Like,
with with added sugar and tastes
yeah,
better.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it definitely
That's
tasted better.
great.
Bavarian beer tastes
Okay, sorry,
good in
keep going.
general. Um, yeah, I mean, and things kind of devolved as they do, right? Like around 14, 15, sneak in some beers here or there in the park with like friends. I don't think I've really told many people this. We used to go to the grocery store, and in Germany, they have like little flasks of alcohol right at the register, and we would just swipe
Yeah.
them right before gym class. So during lunch, we'd just be swiping these like little bottles and just like drinking them before gym. And then like for the first 15 minutes in gym, I'd be like all fucked up, being like, oh God, and then sweat it out and feel horrible because that's a not the best time to drink. It is before PE. Um,
Yeah.
and it kind of tapered off. There was one moment in my youth, I think I was somewhere between 16 and 17, and I drank a whole lot of alcohol, and I had alcohol poisoning. And there's a lot of graphic details to the story, a lot of vomiting involved, but the main thing that I remember of that is waking up in the hospital and still being drunk like hours and hours later. And I grabbed the nurse's like arm and I was like, is it gonna be like this forever? Is this just my life now?
Oh,
And she was like, no, you're gonna be fine. You just drank too much. And I think even a week before that, there was a moment where I was walking home and I knew I was too drunk to go home, and there's just this guy like watering his plants in the garden, and I like like sauntered over to him, and I was like, "Hey, excuse me, do you know a way to like sober up really quickly?" And he looks at me, he's like, "Drink less." And I'm like, "Ah, you're no help.
Oh
That's too late for that." And
my
so like
gosh.
there was a degree of like humor involved in these like earlier stories, and like partying came, right? And like anytime I drank at parties, like I get like applauded and I get like accolades from my peers for being able to drink so much or being able to stay up so late. And like I felt to some degree like the life of the party at times. And I think that degree of like inclusion or feeling included perpetuated a lot of like the drinking. It was really social for a large part of my youth, especially. And around the time when I got the alcohol poisoning, then also there was a stark drop off, and there was like a long time, I'd say like about a year or two, where I was like, oh, I can't drink. Like bad things happen when I drink. I don't drink anymore. I focus on tennis. I focus on sports. And I think it was, I don't know if I've ever told you this story, where basically there was this guy and a girl from my school. The girl dated a friend, and the guy was a friend of mine. And I'm standing at the bus stop just eating a kebab, and they start getting in an argument, and she punches him in the dick, and he slaps her in the face. And I just start laughing because at that point in time, it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. And so the next day, people came to beat him up, and he was hiding in the school. And someone basically pointed to me and was like, he was standing there and laughed when it happened. And so they
Oh,
took my head and smashed me into a car, and they were like kicking me on the ground. This is like the whole journey that started me off with martial arts, because after that moment, like I had this obsession to like be able to defend myself. And so
yeah.
during that time, I'm allergic to like pain medication. And so I go to California to get away from Germany because it's vacation time anyways. It was like a week before fall vacation. And that's when I started smoking weed for the first time. And I was like super hesitant about it. I was resistant because like I was like, no drugs, no smoking's bad for you, but I was smoking cigarettes. And so eventually I smoked with my cousins, and I just remember like, oh, this tastes really good. That was my first thought. I was like, this tastes way better than I thought it would taste. And I thought like instantly, like cartoonishly, like the world would shift and like, like some crazy stuff would happen. But all that happened was like I felt kind of drunk and maybe a little bit more jovial. And the effect was more instant than when I was drinking, and I didn't feel sick the next day. And so I was like, oh, like this is better than alcohol. And so that started spiraling, right? Like I would take either one whenever it was around, but I kind of leaned more towards like weed more than anything else. And I think it was 18 or 19. Then I'm going to high school at this point. I'd left Germany completely, and I'm at a party completely drunk. And my friends are like, "Can you drive us home?" And I'm like, "Dude, I can't drive." And they're like, "Oh, come on, it's just around the corner." And I got in my car, I backed up, and I was like, "This is a horrible idea." And I drove down the hill, got pulled over by cops, got a DUI. And I literally drove like maybe 100 feet at that point. And so that then sparked this next like point of like sobriety, because now my family's like drug testing me, and they're like keeping me, I'm grounded for months, right? Like I have no social life anymore, but all my friends are partying and talking about like all these things. The girl that I was kind of seeing starts dating someone else because I'm no longer any fun. And I'm like held captive for like 6 months, essentially, just school, school, school. And by the time that I then graduated and like broke free from that, then like that's when life like really started happening fast. I started going back to Germany. I went out clubbing. Suddenly all the different substances and everything came in my life. And it was always this like feeling of like in the beginning, just feeling awkward in the moment and feeling kind of like, oh, I don't belong here, and then that fading away, and then it's like the war stories that you tell yourself with friends afterwards. It's like, oh my God, and this happened, and that happened, and these things, and it was like praised and like raised up to like a standard of like almost this like lore that surrounded our friend group with all these things that we've done and did. And I can't say the moment that then like it shifted to like full addiction. I mean, I probably was already creeping up on me because there was never a social moment that I wasn't able to handle sober and not feel really awkward about. And the first thing I do is just gravitate towards somewhere where I could like drink or smoke to get something within me so that I could be present in a way. But I started noticing how it became less social. And I think this is when I started realizing it was a bit of a problem, right? Like it started being less and less social. I started staying home more. I started doing these things alone. And there was part of me that was like, oh, I don't even want to share this with other people. And like, I want to have it all to myself, right? And then life happened. I had that gnarly head injury. Um, and so there was a couple months of sobriety. And it kept like coming, like life kept trying to push me to sobriety, and I kept crawling and clawing my way back to like addiction. And then I met this girl, um, and I was madly in love with her, and I was sober at the time when we met, like once we started dating, but like I met her the night that I met her, the only reason that like that even worked was because I was intoxicated. And otherwise I wouldn't have been as bold, right? But then like when we started dating, I started really sobering up a little bit, and then like, you know, a couple beers here, a couple joints there, and I was never able to keep it at just like a little bit. So things started spiraling out of control again. Years passed, and eventually she was like, "Hey, you really got to quit this like smoking thing." Like at that point I didn't drink much anymore, but like the smoking had gotten way out of control. And so I tried to stop that, going to like different places for help. And at the same time, she'd be like, "Hey, can you roll me joints?" And so I'd be like craving weed and rolling these joints for her and then watching her smoke them and me being like, I really want to smoke it too, but like if I want this to work, it's not going to. And then by the time that she left, like I had no reason to stay stopped anymore. And then fell right back into like the addiction. Um, and then life kind of just kept bouncing back and forth, right? Like there were times when I got like a couple weeks sober. I think the longest I ever got sober before this was about 155 days. And I remember because I was
Okay.
counting every single day. And this is around the time that we met. This was that like COVID year, the end of COVID, me like coming out of like being stuck in the house, just being intoxicated all the time. I think a lot of people that had addictive personalities and like addiction issues, it really spiked during COVID because of the isolation, and there just wasn't anything else to do for a lot of people. So like I'm coming out of that, and then that's when I met, my one of my exes that you you heard all about back then. Um and
Yep.
I muscled through some crazy stuff to the point where that relationship again fell apart pretty dramatically back then. And I I got a bottle of whiskey and I put it on the table when I asked her if she'd met someone else because I was here in Germany for a couple weeks visiting family. And I was like, if she tells me she lost her phone or something happened or it's not true, then I'm going to pour this bottle out. But if she tells me that she met someone else, then I'm going to drink this bottle in one go. And then I got that text that I was dreading and expecting, and essentially half the bottle was gone before I replied. And so
Whoa.
then rerouted my ticket. Instead of going home, I went to New York. Legit, and I went on a crazy bender, which ended up with me passing out under a bench in New York somewhere and taking like a cab home. And then by the time I got back to California, it was already off to the races. There was no stopping at that point. And then I remember that girl, which I'm not trying to name drop any of them out of respect for
Yeah,
them.
no.
Crazy stuff happened, right? Like I came back, and so I remember, I think we talked about this too. I'd be like, yeah, and she lives above me, and it's so cool. Like we live so close, and you'd be like, yeah, that's great. Like, and I'm like, why is he saying it
Yeah.
like that? Like, what's wrong with that? And then when we weren't together anymore, I found out very quickly why everyone was so hesitant, right? Because now she's
Yeah.
dating this other guy, and it's right above me. And so things started escalating, and I'm on a bender, and I'm losing my mind. I think I got like over 30 noise complaints in 10 days because I was batshit crazy during that time period. I do not recommend anyone date a girl that lives in the apartment above or below you. Specifically above, below
Yeah.
might be better, I don't know, but above, I cannot recommend it less. Um, Eventually we go and like we talk things out, right? And then as I go to say bye, I give her this like big hug, and she doesn't break the hug off and I don't break it off. So we're just hugging for an undefined amount of time. I go to leave, and the new guy basically was in his car, and he saw through a mirror, he saw us hugging and saw me leaving the apartment. And I'm like, oh, I'm never gonna see her again. Everything's been spoken about. It's a clean break. This is as close to closure as I'll get. And half an hour to hour later, I get a phone call. She's crying. She's like, blah blah blah, packed up all his stuff. He wouldn't even talk to me, thinks something was happening between us. And so two of like the probably most pivotal points of my like life happened that night because my crazy ass is like, "Oh, I know how this feels. You probably shouldn't be alone right now. Do you want me to come over and hang out? Like, you shouldn't be alone." And she's like, "Yeah, I'd like that." I knew exactly what I was getting myself into, and you know, I got what was advertised is in that sense. And so two things happened. Like one, first of all, the first hour of that night was the weirdest thing ever because I'm sitting here next to a girl that I'm in love with that's telling me all about this guy that she's in love with. And a month before that, she's telling me how she wanted to marry me. So I'm in like this, what is my life situation? And so before I'd been sober, and now her and I are drinking together, and things start getting sloppier and sloppier and sloppier. And there's this one moment where she looks at me and like she's like, "Oh, I'm just so scared that he's going to relapse because he was an addict too, and with some other substances, we'll say." And I look at the glass in my hand filled with like vodka cranberry because that was her drink. And I look at her and I look at the glass and I look at her again and I take a sip while looking at her. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, I know, but like you're different. You just have a problem with like weed and alcohol." And so in my mind, I was like, "Oh, okay. So if I just go off the rails more, then like she'll love me, right? Like I just don't have bad enough of a problem. So I just really have to fall into my addiction heavier and then she'll love me." And then like her and I ended up hooking up, all will fade to black on that. I walk out of the bedroom to go get a glass of water and I click on her phone to see what time it is. And I click on the screen and it's not locked and a text chain pops up and it says, "Whatever you think is happening, it isn't." And it's a text from her to the guy. And I look at the text And I look over at her naked on the bed, look at the text, look at her, look at the text, and look at her, and I'm just like, this is gonna really mess me up, but it's not something I want to unpack right now. And I just kind of shrugged it off and just went to go get water. And that text message has, I think, to a very real and deep level, crippled my ability to trust a woman in a relationship fully for
Uh,
years. Slowly, it's something that I'm able to unpack and unravel, but like for years after that, it was just like anytime a girl would write me that or something akin to that, I'd be like, she is lying. It is worse than I can imagine. Right.
yeah.
And so that was the match thrown onto like the gasoline, right? That whole night. And I fell into the darkest hole I think I ever had. It got to the point that it was so bad in California that like, I was on the street at times. I was like living out of my car, and it was just it got so dark, and a lot of people like also started like kind of pulling away from me. And I had the opportunity to come back to Germany, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go to Germany and I'm going to get my life back together. I'm going to get an apprenticeship. I'm going to actually like follow through with something, and it's going to be better. That lasted a whole like 2 weeks. I was sober for about 2 weeks coming back. And then I was, especially in Germany, suddenly now I'm drinking also a lot more beer. Like in America, I drink a lot of liquor. I can't, I can't drink American beer. Like if I really needed something and there wasn't anything else there, I'd drink it. But like it just tastes bad. It just really tastes bad. And in Germany, the beer is great. So like I've started drinking a lot of beer and less liquor, but it became more constant, right? It became more like, oh, I'll have a beer at lunch. Oh, I'll have a beer like after work. So it became so much more consistent. And the amount was just like, it was more frequent. The amount started skyrocketing. Smoking became a thing too. Like I, I didn't just stay with those kind of things either. Dived into like other things as well, which, didn't really help. And then like I got a really good job opportunity out here. That's when I was working in the fiber optics industry. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to take this really seriously, and I'm going to be sober. And that lasted like 2.5 weeks. And then I was like, well, like I could smoke or drink on like a Saturday. Like that should be fine, right? And then I was like, oh, but like I can do Friday and Saturday. And it was like, well, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday is fine too. And then like one Monday crept in, and then it was like, oh, well, like Thursday and Friday, because Friday's just a half day anyways. And so like it just slowly started creeping into every day of the week again. And that spiral continued for years. And then I'd always try and stop, and I'd get a couple days. Sometimes I get a week, but it would feel rough. Like I never even get out of the detox phase. And like I knew I had a problem for years at that point because I wanted to stop multiple times. I mean, this is the alcohol is so socially acceptable that it's it felt like less of a problem, and it was more acceptable to like my family, to friends, to like even the people at my job. Like the alcohol I knew was a catalyst, but like the weed was really the thing taking me out on a daily basis, right? And it wasn't until I stopped everything that I noticed that they just go hand to hand with me, that I couldn't do one without the other. That like if I'd stop one, the other would just increase and the other would come back. I couldn't just cut one out of my life. Those two substances specifically were for me the thing that was just always there. And I tried to stop. And I remember probably like 40 or 50 times, maybe even more than that. I mean, it was like I would throw shit out at night. I would throw the weed away, I would pour out the alcohol, and in the morning I would be going through the trash looking for like what
Whoa.
buds survived that didn't touch anything gross, or like could I clean it off, was there any little bit left in the bottle? And at that point in time, dude, I was praying to God every single night. I was like, dude, kill me. Like, please just, or I guess, I don't know if we can say that on YouTube, but like, I didn't want to live anymore. I was praying God to just end it all. And in the morning, I would wake up in rage that I woke up again. I'd just be so pissed. I'd be like, why are you putting me through this? Like, why am I waking up? And I think like to skip ahead a little bit, the one thing that try to say every morning is, like, thank you for another day. And I think that that's like the biggest shift and the biggest kind of thing that's happened from this whole thing is that I am grateful to be alive. Life is really hard at times, and there's times when like I don't know if I am going to be able to figure everything out. I don't know if I'm going to be okay, but like most days I'm alive. I'm happy to be alive. And that's crazy and a miracle in itself, right? And so to jump back to the addiction, I'm going through this spiral. I'm literally thinking about like the darkest things and thinking about like ending everything. And I come home from a really shitty work day, and my friend is like waiting at my house. And at that point, like we were pretty good friends. We don't talk anymore. That's a whole nother topic, but he's just waiting. He's like, "Hey, what's up?" Like, "Yeah, I just thought we'd hang out today." I was like, "Okay, strange." Normally he would like hit me up about it, but he was just waiting at my house. And I'm like, I'm in a bad headspace already. Work sucked that day. And I get a phone call from my mom, and she's like, "Are you sitting down?" And I'm like, "What's going on?" Like, I thought she's gonna tell me my sister's dog passed away, or like something. I don't know what I was expecting. I ran like a couple scenarios in my head, but she's like, "This is gonna break your heart." And I'm like, What is it? Just tell me." And she's like, "Johnny died." And that was my cousin, right? He was about a year and a half older than me. And he was like my hero, but like also he was my mentor when it came to like drinking and drugging. He was someone that pushed me into like, not that necessarily pushed me, but introduced me to all of these things. And first person I smoked weed with, always took me to like the high school parties, and I would try to consume as much as possible to impress him by how much I could do. And so like when he passed away, right, it was like autopilot for a little while. And I remember just kind of taking some time off work, going back to work, the work week just kind of flying by, finding myself on a plane to California, going to the funeral, showing up there, being sober till after the funeral, and then, just drinking and smoking, spending time with my friends there. And then I was like very committed to make the most of the opportunity I had at my work, and it was like, okay, I'm going to come back and I'm going to be a lot more focused. I'm going to try and, really make my cousin proud of me. And I land in Germany and got fired. So like in the plane, I turned my phone on. There's 7 missed calls from my boss. And so I call him back, and he's like, "Hey, what's up?" And I'm like, "I just landed. What's going on?" He's like, "We'll talk tomorrow. Call me tomorrow." And I walked out. In Germany, they have little like smoking areas. So like I walked out of the plane, I go across to this little like smoking booth, light a cigarette, and it's calling back, and I'm like, "Am I fired?" And he's like, "Yeah, you get like a month paid." I didn't want to say it because you just landed. And I'm like, "No, just tell it to me straight, man. Like, I don't want to deal with this hanging over my head for the rest of the day." And so then comes like this weird stretch of time, because I was like unemployed, but I was getting unemployment from Germany that was like substantial because of the job that I was working in and the amount I was getting paid at the time. Um, there was a paintball tournament that my friend puts on every year. It's actually happening at the end of the month again, where I'm gonna go help him, and it was the first time that I helped him there in that capacity, and that was a great distraction because I didn't have to think about work. I didn't have to think about my cousin. I was busy. I was working like 12 to 14 hours there, but it was really fun. But it was also a lot of drinking and smoking. So like I didn't have any time to sit with myself or my problems, and I was busy, and I felt competent and I felt good. And then I come back to an empty apartment and too much time, enough money to sedate myself for the whole day, and I just fell into a hole. And there was like a specific moment where like I heard my cousin's voice saying like, "Bro, you got to get sober." And that kind of rattled me. And so like I called a family member that has experience with these issues as well, and I started trying some things and nothing stuck. So I could get like 23 hours, 22 hours together, but never even a full day. And I did that for a bit of time until I gave up completely. And I remember like the unemployment was ending, and I was looking in the bathroom and I couldn't even recognize myself in the mirror anymore. At that point, I was dodging mirrors pretty much every single day. But I actually like looked in the mirror and I saw myself for the first time in months. And I remember just like thinking like, who am I? How did I get here? And like I just need like I prayed to God. Like I was like, I just need something. I just need some kind of opportunity, some kind of chance to move forward. And I think that either the next day or later that day, a friend called me and was like, "Hey, here's a job opportunity." It was again in fiber optics, and the company sucked. The people there's a whole bunch of stuff around that, but they had me working away from home, and I was so busy and so disconnected from everything that I just happened to get like a couple days together. And then like I started looking into places that could help me with these issues, and 3 days grew to six. There's always like crossroads along the way, like I came home on day six and there was, alcohol here and weed and tobacco already mixed up, ready to roll. And I had to make choices along the way. It's like, okay, do I want to go back to the life that I was living, or do I want to stay on this road and try something new? And I don't even know if it's dedication or survival or just I was just so tired. I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was absolutely beaten by life. It wasn't the lowest point of my life by any means, but I was just like the train hit a stop, the doors opened, and I just walked through the doors. And I just got off the train. And there were parts that were by far way worse and more of like a rock bottom kind of situation. But like, I mean, spiritually, I was just at my lowest. Like, and then like life started happening, right? Because alcohol and drugs were like a medicine to me. They were the crutch, they were the coping mechanism, they were the thing that helped me deal with the roughness of life, they helped me deal with pain, they helped me deal with struggles, they helped me also like celebrate successes, but those became, far and few between, especially back then. And so, yeah, then suddenly it's like, okay, you got to live life on life's terms, you know? Yeah, you got to
So
face all the shit.
yeah, so you made the decision then to just cut out drinking and drugs and all that, and so well, you said you were looking at different options and stuff like that. What did did you do this on your own, or did you go seek help, or
I found a place that helps me with my problems. That's all I can really
great?
talk about or say that,
Yep.
a community of people that can relate to the experiences that I had and
Yeah.
helped me along the way to move forward in life. That's the thing is like when you stop these things, like I thought alcohol and drugs were the problem. I was absolutely convinced, and then take those things out and suddenly like I'm still messing up. I'm still screwing up. I'm realizing that I hadn't grown as much as I would have liked over all those, decades of use. And suddenly I'm realizing, oh, the problem is me. And I didn't have any tools. So like I had to figure out a new way of living life. And it's something that I've been thinking about lately and been saying lately, like growing pains are privilege of those that are growing. And when I was running away from my problems and numbing myself, it wasn't always as overtly painful, but there just wasn't any growth. Not really. I was stagnating in a lot of meaningful ways. And as soon as like I started actually living life, there was a lot of pain. There's a lot of things that I suppressed. There's a lot of things that I thought I had obliterated from my mind, but I'd really just pushed down so far that with sufficient amount of sobriety, a lot of those things resurfaced. And there
Yeah.
was a lot of, there's just like a lot of pain that I had to like examine. I think those are things also that like shaped and inspired the book that I'm working on right now, is just like looking at those things honestly in a way and trying to process it still. So like yeah, I mean I thought the hardest part about being sober would be not drinking and drugging,
Yeah.
right? Like that's if you would have asked me this before all of this, I've been like, yeah, the cravings. The cravings fell away pretty rapidly for me. I think like somewhere between 40 and 90 days, like the cravings kind of really fell away. There's there's moments where I'm like, a beer sounds nice, or like a bottle of Hennessy, or like a joint would be cool. Um, but back in the day, those were obsessive thoughts that stuck in my brain and rattled around there like an itch that I couldn't reach until I actually consumed something, right? Now they're just a thought. It just floats through my brain and it dissipates. It has no power and it doesn't stay in my mind, right?
Yeah.
It's just a
So
thought.
yeah, so as you know, I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan. It is old like kind of self-help stuff.
Hmm.
In one of the things that he talks about is a dragon, right? And how if you have an issue, that dragon, it starts small, and then over time, if you don't address that dragon, it just grows and grows and grows. And then, there could be multiple little dragons that kind of just start growing as you don't address them. And I think an analogy that I think that goes pretty well with your analogy, and I would almost call it instead of a dragon, a demon, where you you do these things to kind of suppress and not even think about or try not to see that demon, and then you get sober and you're looking around and all of a sudden you have like 10,000 huge demons that you have to fight off. And it's like, oh, like this is that uncomfortableness that you were talking about, is like you suppress these things for so long, and now you have to face them head on, and you don't have the crutch of drugs and alcohol to,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's interesting. You have any thoughts on that analogy? And
Yeah, I mean for me, from my personal experience, like I woke up in a landfill of mistakes. And I'm looking
yeah,
at like my life and suddenly like, there was maybe this like moment where I kind of snapped back into my body and into reality. and I looked around and I was like, oh, look at all like the bridges I burned. Look at all the like wasted opportunities. Look at like what I've made of my potential. Look at like all of this like pain. Look at all of this resentment. Look at all of this in every direction of life. I was looking at just problems and or demons and however you want to describe it. They were all around me. And when I looked at everything all at once, it became really overwhelming. And so the way that I essentially went
Yeah.
about it was just focusing on one thing at a time. And just like in the beginning, it's kind of just one foot in front of the other. It's just like even just staying sober for a day, that was a win. And some days that was the only win that I had. Like I went to bed and really did fuck all, and I just was like, hey, but like I stayed sober today. That's a win. Hell yeah. And I don't think I noticed the change that much because I just kept my head down and just kept putting one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. That by the time that I looked up, things had changed around me and like within me to a point where and they did it so incrementally that like I didn't notice it. It was other people that noticed it. Right. I think then like you and me started then also like talking again and like I could actually be accountable and follow through with things. And I think there was a degree of like hubris that kind of came in then too. Cause
Yeah.
like I thought humility had to do with humiliation, right? And I was like, oh, like I must be so humble. I've been humiliated all kinds of ways so many times, right? So I must be the most humble person. But really, like there was nothing for me to be proud of and nothing for me to be prideful over in the sense that like once I became sober and I started making like strides, that's where I learned what like real humility is. And that was a lesson that I started because I think there was a degree where I lacked a lot of humility, and I thought that like while this isn't an easy journey and it is something that one can be proud of, I lost sight of it and almost gave myself like too much of a pat on the back for doing this. Like I'm like, look at me, look at this heroic journey that I'm going on and getting sober when it's to a degree something that I always should have done. Um, and so I'm trying to find grace in it, and give myself some grace and understand everybody has their own journeys and their own timeline and things, but it's also like I'm doing this for me and other people that struggle with it. I was judging other people. I was like, why can't you just stop it? Like, look at it. It's not that hard. Just, you know, do it. And then I was lacking like empathy towards that in a really hypocritical way, because it's like I know all the pitfalls. I took every wrong turn on the journey here. If someone should understand how that looks and feels like, it should be me. And so
Yeah.
the judgmental side of things is really what I'm talking about when like that pridefulness came in because I was like, I'm so sober and I'm doing it so well. And like look at all these people that aren't doing it well enough. And it just life really beat me over the head. It was like, hey man, have some humility. This is what that
Yeah.
looks like. Have some empathy towards like people going through struggles. And I think the analogy that comes to mind straight ahead is like, if you're in the glass house, don't throw stones. And it's like, yeah, it's been really interesting. I think the main thing in sobriety is like I'm getting to know myself for the first time in my life, what all of that encompasses. I think for a long time, I put on a lot of different masks and performed a lot of different people and like how I thought you wanted me to be or how I thought I should be. And I became that person in most of my life. In most areas of my life, I never really dropped the mask to friends, to girlfriends, to family members, to strangers. I would portray who I thought I should be or who I thought you wanted me to be, but never myself, right? And then in sobriety, that mask just kind of crumbles, um, and I think the biggest gift is like I can look in the mirror right now. There's one right there, and I don't flinch, and I don't want to jump out the window. And I don't want to say that I know who I am or who I want to be. Identity is something that we talk about quite often. Um, but I'm okay with the learning of who
Yeah.
that is, you know?
Yeah. What's what's been harder about sobriety than like, the average person maybe who hasn't gone through that wouldn't realize?
Well, straight off the bat, everyone I think has a preconceived notion that it's just going to be the alcohol or the drugs, right? That it's going to be the
Yeah.
substances that are going to be
Yeah.
the hardest part. The emotions are the first thing that really hits like a truck, right? Like I call it the emotion pretzel. Is I numbed myself from emotions for so long that when they all started resurfacing, I didn't know where one began and or one ended and the other began, right? Like they just
Uh,
all were like pretzeled together in this like laughing when I should be crying, crying when I should be laughing, bursts of anger, extreme sadness, and just this like pretzel of emotions that just didn't seem to make any sense or have any rhyme or reason because like they were just all coming back online at the same time and I was just starting to feel everything all at once. And that's really overwhelming. Um so that's the first like major hurdle I feel like that you face is this like the emotion pretzel. The second thing is um like this just like deep resentment towards like people, places, and things, and especially oneself. Like looking at my peers that are, like fully employed, have maybe like wife and kids, and like are like fully in life, and then looking at my life and being like, oh, I'm not at all where I want to be, and like comparing myself to them, and it's like looking at like feeling like a failure, in a lot of ways. I think there's very few people that can go through addiction and alcoholism and any of these kind of things and be successful and productive, right? And if you're able to be, successful with relationships, you probably can't maintain your career that well. If you're able to be successful in your career, you probably can't maintain your relationships that well. It's like something's got to give in the juggling act, because when you're just sober and you're juggling life, it's hard enough to keep everything afloat. But when you have like one medicine ball sized thing that is like addiction and alcoholism and these substances, and you're trying to like juggle the tennis balls around it, but mainly you're just trying to keep that one up, something falls off, right? Because that becomes the priority over everything else. So then like the reckoning of like the wreckage of your past, like looking at that and being like, I screwed up. That's I think the second major hurdle that people have to look at. And then I think the third thing, like once I'd gone through the pretzel and kind of made some sort of peace with the wreck, the next thing was like identity crisis that hit me like never before, because I'd built
yeah.
my identity around the substances, around the party person, around the stoner, the drinker, the like renegade rock and roll lifestyle. Like it was such a major part of the puzzle of my identity that when I removed all of that as thoroughly as I possibly could, now there's just a hole. And I didn't know what to do with that hole, because at this point, now I'm sober. I'm starting to live a more respectable life for myself, but I don't trust my decisions. every decision that I made had led me to that point. So my rapport with myself is at an all-time low. My track record looking back is like every decision that I've made has not been so great. So now I'm looking at this hole inside of me and I'm like, what do I do with this? And can I be trusted with the responsibility of putting something there?
Yeah, interesting. So if someone listening to this, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the fourth thing is something that everybody then faces is tragedy and triumph. Life's going to happen. It's going to continue to happen. Good things are going to happen. Bad things are going to happen. And going through both of those things sober is is a challenge, right? That you're like, I didn't know what to do with a good day. I didn't know how to feel about
Yeah,
it, how to think about it. I didn't know how to deal with bad stuff without coping with that. And so that's when the rubber meets the road, right? Like, how well is your foundation? What are the tools you've acquired up until then? How willing are you to pick up the phone and reach out for help and talk to someone about this? Because yeah, there was some rough patches and still are. Um, but going through that sober gives you the experience to know that like you can go through that sober and you grow through those moments. Those are the growing pains, right? Like there's going to be pain along the way, but you learn a lot and have the confidence and the experience to know that, oh, I can go through something really bad or horrible and still maintain sobriety, which is it's kind of beautiful.
so what have you deduced about who you who you are as a person outside of drugs and alcohol?
That's a really good question. I struggle with that a lot. You know, I think that it's something that I'm still finding out on a daily basis.
Of
And
course.
it's through challenges, right? I think you were someone who told me this specifically that's like do things. You'll find out who you are more through your actions than your thoughts. Because I'm a thinker. I wanna hypothesize and theorize and philosophize about all these different aspects of existence. What happens when stuff happens, right? I think that says a
Yeah.
lot more. Close friend of mine had a pretty heavy like hospitalization last year in the winter, and I got time off. I drove up to Berlin just to be present. Um, that's something that surprised me in the aftermath. I was like, oh, like this isn't the person I used to be. I would have just been more selfish or more self-absorbed or self-pitying, but even though there was nothing to do but be present in that moment, I just did that in like a heartbeat. Um, I think the thing that like I found myself in positions of leadership in many different
Mm,
ways, figuring out then like as someone who wanted to be always either felt outcast or wanted to be like the one like a hermit kind of I want to say. So I wanted to be left alone to my own devices and not judged. Finding myself in a position of leadership was really strange, and I had to understand that I don't like the leader isn't always the person who chooses to be the leader. Like there was this one group dynamic where one person really wanted to be the leader, and I just kind of ended up as the leader. And I was like, I don't want this position. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to walk right now. Like, don't put me here.
yeah.
And so I spent like months talking to people about like, what does leadership mean? And, you know, talking to all these people. And then I'm watching a documentary on the TV and it's talking about wolves. And it's just like the leader of the pack is in the back and makes sure that everyone keeps pace and keeps people safe. And like that's where like something in my brain clicked and I was like, oh, like I'd love to be that kind of leader. that like when action is required, like I'll show up, but like I'd rather teach people how to fish than just provide them with fish. And rather be in the background, and I'd let other people walk in front, but just keep everybody at pace and make sure that if anyone loses their way, that I'm there to help them back on the path. And what that means in practice is something that I'm still trying to figure out. But I think that like idea of leadership is one that really resonates with me. The fact that I even am a leader to some degree is something that I had to reconcile with. I also thought that creativity was something that I only had because of substances. And that was something that actually became like first it kind of fell off in the first couple like months, and it was very sporadic,
Yeah.
and then it really like went all the way through the roof. In ways that I hadn't really experienced before. And I think it's because I became more in tune with myself and more comfortable within my own like body. And so then like there was a deeper level of authenticity and a bit more like bravery and boldness to be true to my own self within like anything that I make. Songs became extremely more personal, um, and suddenly people started resonating with them. And I was like, wait, I kept trying to make stuff to impress people and nobody liked it. And now I'm just trying to express something that is bothering me or that I'm feeling inside. And people are like, oh my God, like I can relate to that so much. And so that was a real like smack in the face of a realization where I was like, oh, this performative side of myself was actually holding back the performance. And it was like the moment that I dropped the mask and just am like fully myself, like suddenly people can relate to it more because it's just more real.
Yeah. What advice would you give somebody who maybe is going through or wants to go through this journey of sobriety?
That's a really good question. I think there's a lot to unpack there. The first thing is like you don't have to do it alone. A little bit of research online will point you in the direction of various different ways and paths and places that can support you on this journey. Find the one that's right for you. I think it's not a one size fits all kind of thing. This is something that is extremely personal, and I know what works for me might not be what works for someone else. Um,
Sure.
the second thing is like just try and stick with it one more day. You know, when you're doing it, there's going to be like a lot of times when you're like, I want to give up. I want to throw everything down. And in those moments, just try to make it one more day. And just that is all you can ask of yourself at times. Just make it one more day. And that next day comes on, that might be a really rough day too. And then just think, well, like I can just do one more day. And the more one more days you can add up, the more the more it just kind of sinks in. And I think like for me in the beginning, like I was counting days. I don't even remember my day count now. I know it's something over 500 because I looked at it recently for something. Um, the days just add up, and eventually it becomes more of a way of life.
Yeah, I remember early on when we were talking, you would know that number right off the bat. Like, yep, 30 days, 31 and a half days sober or whatever else, like you
Yeah,
would, and that is something to celebrate. But you know, I think it's a natural thing as time goes on. It's like, okay, I don't like it's I don't need to know the exact day anymore because I've been doing it. Now it's like, okay, maybe we'll celebrate that 1 year, that 2 year mark, that 3 year mark, maybe even months sober or something like that. Like how many months total and
Yeah. Yeah, it becomes less about the amount of days and more what you do with the days. For me, at
interesting.
least.
Yeah. Um and so now you're doing the sober life. Have you ever
Yeah.
thought, because I know you said that you've when you were kind of struggling with sobriety early on in addiction, you would think, oh, I can have a drink on Saturday. Does that does that cross your mind now that you've like exuded the self control after all this time of like, oh yeah, I can do it once a month. That'll be okay.
Um, no, not really. So
Yeah,
like I mentioned before, there are occasional moments when like I'll be like, "Oh, that sounds nice." I'll never plan a day. I'll never plan like a moment. There's been moments where I'm in this grocery store and I'm standing in front of the liquor aisle and I'm like, "Oof, my life feels pretty sucky right now. This feels like a really good bad decision to make." And so like in those moments specifically, I'll usually call a friend. I'll usually call someone and be like,
cool.
"Hey, I just need you to be on my phone right now, and just until I leave the store, I need like accountability partner. Just keep me on the narrow." Um, yeah, no, I never plan a day or a date. Um, Sometimes I have like dreams about it. I think that's also something that like we didn't really touch on, and something that I didn't know was going to be so frequent. Like drunk dreams or drug dreams are going to happen a lot in sobriety. Um,
Interesting.
they can be very disorientating. They can be very emotionally stirring. Um, my rule of thumb is the dream says less about your sobriety than your reaction to the dream when you wake up. Like if I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh my God, and I'm freaking out and I'm like, am I even still sober? Then like my sobriety is probably not in the best place, right? Like there's turmoil going on, there's things I'm not really looking at, and that is rocking the boat to the point where that dream rattles me. If my sobriety is in a really good place, I'll wake up in the morning and be like, that was a crazy dream. Well, let's go
So
on
are
with the
they?
day. Like,
Yeah. So are those dreams? I can see those dreams going two different directions. One, like you dream and you have that sip of alcohol and or whatever, and you're thinking like, oh, this is awesome. I love this so much. And then there's probably another dream where it's like, what are you doing? Like, stop. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm drunk right now. And like kind of like a nightmare. Like some like
yeah,
I could see a fantasy dream and then a nightmare dream, you know?
I I think that's really accurate. So like dreams are also extremely personal. So there's
Yeah.
very unique versions of all of this, I'd say, to each person specifically. My
Yeah.
experience has been essentially like three types of dreams. One where like kind of celebratory around it, like you're saying, where like I'm enjoying the intoxication. One where like almost instant shame, fear, regret. Oh no, I'm gonna have to tell everyone. Like I'm gonna have to tell my mom I relapsed, like those kind of things. Also, a third type where within the dream, I'm hiding it. So like I'll consume
Oh,
something, I'll smoke, and then I'll be hiding it from people in the dream that I was like smoking or drinking. Those are the
interesting.
trippiest ones that I have. And there's only been one that really sticks out to me, and I was smoking a joint in the dream and I could feel the highness. Like I could actually feel the level of intoxication as if I were smoking a joint in reality. And I think it was my mom and my dad and a friend walked into the room with like groceries to cook. And I was like on the balcony and I like chucked the joint like off the balcony. And then like I'm like sitting at the dinner table with them and I'm like trying to pretend like I'm sober and I'm just like losing my mind essentially in the dream, and it's starting to get over exaggerated, almost to like a hallucinogenic standpoint. Uh, that one was specifically really vivid, and there was not this feeling of like shame, regret, or guilt. It was this feeling of like, oh, like I'm a fraud, I'm a liar, and like waking up in the morning and being like, oh, all of this is like bullshit.
Yeah. So here's another interesting thought while you're talking about this. Um, I think your primary motivation for staying sober is for you, but I one, is that correct? And then two is, do you have these external motivations, like you dreaming that you have to tell everybody that you relapse, which you know you could hide it, but that doesn't feel good either. So it's like, is that one of your motivations for staying sober as well?
It has to be completely intrinsic. From my experience, for me, like I've been court ordered to stay sober, right? With the whole DUI situation, that didn't last very long. I've been girlfriend ordered to stay sober, that did not last very long. I've tried
Interesting.
to do it for a job. I've tried to do it for family. I've tried to do it for everything essentially a man imaginable or available to me in my life experience. Um, and it's never held or stuck. It wasn't to the point where like I just didn't want to live that life anymore. Like truly deeply, like and of course in the beginning when I got sober, the main thing that I didn't want was all the consequences. Like if I could drink and drug and do all this without all the consequences, like there's no reason for me to even get sober, right? And so my first
Right.
goal was like, I just want to get sober for a year, get my life figured out, and then I'll go back to it. Like if I can just make it to 1 year, then everything will be fine. And then the question started becoming less about like, especially once I hit that year mark, right? It was less about like, oh, can I get a year sober? It's like, what can I do with a sober year? Because then I started realizing like, oh, like my sleeping patterns better. I'm starting to like make better connections. I started cooking for myself again, started actually like caring about myself and other people in ways like just unfolding as a person. I think I was so restrained by substances and by like the fear and the anxiety that like really just like a caricature of a person was walking around this world that had like the outlines of me and some of my personality and interests and things colored that like character, but it wasn't really a fully developed person. And somewhere along the way, I started actually thinking like, oh, like I kind of like this guy. And that person that I came to like, I can only get to know better by staying sober. And so that became like a motivator as well, is like, well, I want to see where this road goes and like what more like I can learn about myself. I've spoken about this quite honestly so far, so I will say there is a lingering fascination when it comes to hallucinogenics. That's something that every now and then I'll be like, it's not so much as a craving as more of like, hmm, a little bit of mushrooms or something like that would be just interesting. But that has to do more, I think, with like a little bit more of the artist side of me, the breaking down the way that I perceive the world and changing that fundamentally like becomes something that like I became very entranced by, but it's kind of like living in a dream, like those things are, especially at a young age, like I don't think if I could go back, I wouldn't do them at the younger age that I did. Like those things, you're kind of like opening the terminal to your like soul or your brain and your personality, and you're coding blind, right? So like you're going into things and you're like formatting parts of your personality and linking like pathways in your brain and thought process, but you're doing it like blind in a language you don't understand. And so I think that's where like a lot of harm can come from these things, is especially when people do it at like younger ages. You can unintentionally do things to your psyche um, that you really don't want. And in some cases are irreversible. I mean, I know a lot of people that were absolutely fine doing these things. I know some people that, took it once or twice, had a bad trip, and changed forever to a degree. Paranoia, psychosis, those kind of things are very real. And thinking about these things like honestly and speaking about them, I don't want to glorify any of this, right? Like I did them, they're part of my path and they're part of my journey, and I've had a range of experiences with them, but especially when it comes to psychedelics and hallucinogenics, those things are not party favors, and they're things that
Yeah.
should be approached extremely intentional and extremely mindful and under like some kind of guidance. I mean, there's a reason why in older cultures it's done with a shaman, or in like modern day research it's done with a psychotherapist as a guide. Um, they're they demand a level of respect that I think not only me but a lot of people don't do appropriately.
Yeah. You can totally see that. Okay. What other? I've got more fun topic to talk about before we
Yeah,
move
should
on.
I
Though
ask you
I
some
wanted to.
questions?
Well, but before we do that, I want to just open up. Is there anything else about sobriety and addiction that you want to bring up? You talked. I mean, you covered a lot. We're already an hour and a half in, so
Yeah, I
that was
just
the majority
realized
of it.
that.
So
Um, I think like there was a way to take the shame factor away. I think a lot of people are ashamed because they think it's just a will power question,
yeah,
and you look at your peers and you're like they can do these things and have some control, and they don't go off the rails, and they can, stop when they need to stop, and um that becomes really painful, and you think like, why am I so weak? Um, I think that like it's not a question of like weak or strong, and I think speaking about it openly is one of the best things that we can do, because I know for me, there's a lot of people that spoke about it openly that I heard from that kind of showed me that it was okay to speak about it, and that there is like a way forward. Um, I don't know, I guess that like if you're struggling with these things, kind of talk about it.
Yeah.
And
I
yeah,
have a
it's tough.
so you mentioned shame and you wish that you could get rid of it. And it's interesting because I'm a big believer in even the negative emotions are if used the right way, negative emotions are absolutely critical. And although shame doesn't feel good at the time, maybe there's a way that you like recalibrated shame, for example. Like I think it's if you're feeling shame in this for this, I think it's a reasonable emotional response given what you've been through.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying too. I think the problem is the spiral, right? The of like
Yeah,
I want to stop, I can't stop, feeling ashamed that you can't stop, doing it again, wanting to stop, and then like you're going through this like loop essentially. And
yeah,
each circle around the loop, you fall out of like rapport and trust with yourself because like make a promise to yourself and break that promise. And some part of you stops believing in yourself because of that.
sure.
You start falling out of
Yeah,
like favor and rapport with yourself to think, you know, your subconscious starts thinking, "Oh, this person is untrustworthy," to your consciousness,
yeah,
right? So there's like a break that happens within. And so that shame each time around the loop becomes compounded and it festers and grows and grows and grows and grows, and I think if we can speak about these things more openly and honestly and other people feel more comfortable about talking about these things, then it's easier when people know about it more openly, right? Because then other people can actually support you. Because there's people in my life that probably would have supported me more if I would have spoken it like honestly about it. But instead, they encouraged that behavior because they didn't know how much I was suffering with it and how much of a problem I had with it.
right. Yeah,
Also, because I
that's
was like lying to
interesting.
myself, I didn't want to admit that I had a problem because that would mean I had to stop.
Yeah.
I remember as a
Well,
kid,
one
uh, there was like a German Dare program, and they came in and they're like who thinks that like they're gonna have like or they know someone that has a problem or they might have a problem with this with something like this. I don't remember the exact phrasing of the question, but I remember my answer. My answer was like, I never want to have a problem with this because that means that I can't do it anymore. And the guy looked at me and was like, I'm gonna see you someday. And I was like, that's weird. Why would we see each other again? And like he knew exactly the path that I was headed on.
interesting. If someone is experiencing shame, is there a learning experience we can derive from that? So kind of let me kind of share my thoughts is like,
Hmm.
I've experienced shame by not following through on commitments and being kind of like irresponsible, and I've felt shame
Yeah.
for that. But the more I've done to kind of prove that I'm not that kind of person anymore, yes, it's something that I can fall back into, and I have. But the more I've proven myself to follow through on my own commitments, the more the more that shame almost goes away.
Yeah, when I was in the spiral of this whole thing, there was a lot of negative self-talk that was going on. And then once like I started getting some time together sober, the negative self-talk just dissipated. And I think it was like
Yeah,
part of my subconscious berating me for, not following through, for not doing what I actually wanted, which was to get sober, right? And so every time that I failed, like, and it would be this thing of like when I'd be sober, I'd want to get like messed up, and then when I'd be under the influence, I'd want to get sober. And so like and so at both times it was like, my conscious brain was like, oh, let's take something, and my subconscious brain then when I was like intoxicated was like, let's not do this anymore. And so there was this like fight between the two, and there was no like cohesion there. So it just started splitting further and further apart. And I think that that can lead to a lot of psychological problems. And I'm lucky to have, made it out relatively sane, I'd say. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I don't know, like shame, fear, guilt are three of like the major things that I think keep people in that spiral. The fear of failure, the fear of appearing weak, the fear of being unaccepted, like not accepted or not like loved, or hated, guilt of being, you know, leading the life that you lead in that spiral. I mean, it's a lot of people start, turning towards, lying and cheating and stealing and then feeling guilty about those kind of things, guilty that you're breaking the promises to others that like ask you to stop or show up in their lives or to yourself, the shame of all of that happening, those all compound. So like the more honest you can be and the more acceptance you can feel, and there's a fine line between acceptance and enabling. Like people that accept you where you are, but don't enable that behavior going forward, it is important. There's also people that like enabled that behavior for me, that knew where I was at and just kind of like let me be. And those are my favorite people, because I'm like, oh, they accept me and they don't judge me. And, like I can just like fall to pieces around them. And some of them
Yeah.
just essentially didn't care about me, and some of them
Yeah.
didn't know how to help, right? And so there, those are also two very different categories. Um, and the ones that didn't know how to help, a lot of them faded out of my life because it became too painful for them to watch.
All right, we're back from a short break. Okay, the next segment, the next thing that I want to get into is the really bad joke segment. So, here's how it works: is I'm going to tell you a really bad joke, and I want you to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. And then I prefaced this with you before the podcast. You're going to tell your really bad joke, and then we'll keep rolling on into the episode. So, um, I get most of my jokes from the Doc Talk, it's Doc Talk, I think is Logan Lyle on Instagram. I got his books, and I love most all of his jokes, and I think they're hysterical. So I'm just gonna open up to a random page, and read the joke. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. I was at a job interview, and the manager handed me a laptop and said, I want you to try and sell this to me. So I put it under my arm, left, and went home. Eventually he called and said, I want my I want my laptop back. I said, $200 and it's yours.
Supply and demand. Um,
Oh yeah. That's actually, I really like that one. I've not heard that one from him before. So pretty funny.
I've heard
How
that
would you
one in
rate
like
that?
other variations. I think somewhere between like 6 and 7.
Yeah. I would actually, I
Yeah.
think that's one of his better ones. It's pretty funny. So I'd probably rate it an 8 myself. All right.
Yeah, it's
What's your
leaning more
joke?
towards 7. All right, my joke fits the subject matter of the earlier portion of the podcast. Irishman sits by the beach, just sitting at the sea, kind of thinking about his life, and he hears a high-pitched voice next to him, "Help, help." And he looks over and he sees a rock and he lifts the rock up, and there's a fairy under there, and she flies out. And she's like, "Oh my God, thank you so much. You saved me." And she tells him, "As thanks, I'd love to give you 2 wishes." And he looks at the fairy and he's like, "Oh, okay, 2 wishes. Wow, crazy. Um, well, first thing, I guess I just love a Guinness that's just like a big bottle of Guinness, and it's just always cold and it never goes empty." And she's like, "Oh, sure, easy." Poof, bottle appears in his hand, ice cold, big Guinness. He drinks and he drinks from it, and it's still full, and he just keeps drinking. And time passes, and now it's been a couple of hours, and the fairy's starting to get a little bit anxious, and she's like, "Hey, like I'm so grateful that you saved me, and I'm really glad you're enjoying your first wish, but um, I'd like to, get moving. There's places I need to go, people I need to see. So if you could just, ask for your second wish and then I can be on my way, that'd be great." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, sorry." And he stops and he thinks for a minute. And then he just looks at the fairy. He's like, "You know what? I'll just take another one of these."
Okay, that's it. He'll just take another one of these.
Yeah, just take another endless Guinness.
Okay. I thought there was going to be a third wish, so that's why I didn't react. Um,
No, it's just 2 wishes.
interesting. Okay. Um, I the punchline didn't land for me, and it probably should have. So I'd probably rate that more of a 4.
Okay.
So
That's an alcoholic joke.
uh okay, interesting. Um, it is did he in the first drink that he ordered? Did he order an endless drink?
Yes.
Okay, I think I missed the endless drink. I was just picturing a big drink. That's where I
No, it's
missed the
it's an
punchline.
endless Guinness that he's just drinking then for hours
Oh
on
man.
end. And then she asks him for what his second wish is, and he just goes, "Yeah, I'll just take another one of these."
Okay, that is definitely funnier.
It is a
I wish
really
I picked up
bad
on that
joke,
minor
right?
detail. It is a really bad joke, yes. Okay, so now let's move on. By the way, I'm curious. One of my last podcasts, I told a riddle, and I love riddles. And I'm not saying
Man.
let's do a riddle today, but I'm wondering if that should be like another break, quote unquote, segment that I should do with the guests. I think the really bad jokes, the guest doesn't have to like it and doesn't have to put a lot of thought into it, but like a riddle, like that would be a lot more intense, especially if the guest doesn't like riddles. And I think it'd be a much longer segment, or at least longer than normal. I'm curious what you think about
Well, I mean,
adding that in.
we could do, as we're trying to do a reoccurring podcast, right? You could give me a riddle, or I could give you a riddle that you have to figure
Yeah.
out by the next podcast.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I like that idea. We can put that on the next podcast as an option. I can come with a riddle. So, um, okay, cool. What topic do you want to talk to me about?
Well, I think the first and foremost question that I have for you is, this is podcast number 50. How do you feel
It
about that?
is kind of, it's interesting. 50 I don't think is like a huge mile marker, but it's statistically speaking, most podcasts don't make it past the first few episodes. And so the fact that I have 50, it's like I can pat myself on the back with that, right? And it's pretty awesome that it's I've gotten to 50 episodes and I've been consistent at it. You know, even with my head issues, I missed a week. But everybody takes a vacation here and there and doesn't air an episode. So I think missing one week out of all the weeks that I've been doing this is a pretty good accomplishment. So it's it doesn't really feel like a huge thing. It's kind of like surreal. I'm almost numb to it, right? Like it's just like, yep, this is what I'm doing now. Like it's what it's my thing. I do this and it's fun. Um, there's still so much that I want to do and grow with it and all that. So
Yeah, I think we were speaking about this a little bit earlier. 50 is like halfway to 100. Once you get to triple digits, like I feel like that's when it really feels different.
yeah, yeah,
So I guess like thinking back on 50 podcasts for you, right?
yeah.
What is your like highlight reel? We talked about this a little bit last podcast, but now there's been a couple more. So what's like the top 3 moments?
Oh, top three moments. Interesting. Um, Gosh, I feel like I need to like look at each guest to actually like say for sure are the top ones. But I really enjoyed the podcast with my parents. I think it was great to kind of exchange stories with my childhood and like just kind of the crazy things that I've been through, like getting attacked by bees and my birth story and all that. So of course the one where it's about me is the top of my list. No, but I recently had Tim Murray on and just hearing his story was super cool. He's won a whole bunch of world records and all that was awesome. I've also really appreciated like the conversations that have been like just super deep, and I want to try to figure out how to get more of those. I think the conversations are already deep that I have with people, but it just feels like I'm missing something, and I haven't quite put my finger on it. So um, yeah,
Well, if I've learned anything from my journey with creativity and creative projects, the more authentic you are and the more real you are, it pulls that authenticity and realness out of people. The more you try to perform in any kind of way, the more it repels that. So maybe
yeah,
like watching those kind of things in the future and maybe even looking back and seeing like where are moments that you've been like really authentic and how did that drive the conversation and where were you more like performing as a host and how did that drive the conversation? Maybe that's something to look at. And this leads
yeah,
into the question as well, the next one with using the structure of a podcast as a crutch.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I I've been thinking a lot about this recently. Is well, like early on, I would want to keep the flow going so much that I would look at the next question and kind of focus on that and have that in the back of my head while the person's talking and
Yeah.
kind of almost miss the context of what the person is saying and didn't have a response. Like there was one podcast where somebody was I think it was David's podcast where he was talking about like his ADHD and how he was made fun of, and I said something like "very cool" or something like that after he was talking about being made fun of, and it's like whoa, that's not the right response for that. And I know what was going on in my head. I was trying
Yeah.
to plan the next question, or like not let a question slip from my brain or something like that. And it's like it's those
Yeah.
kinds of things of like learning how to balance the flow and keep the flow going. And kind of what I've come down to, the conclusion is like, if there is silence because I have to look at the next question and think about it a little bit, that is 1,000 times better than me stopping paying attention to the guest for a moment and possibly losing that flow and honestly on authenticity to just like jump into the next question without like any sort of follow-ups or anything like that I could have provided in my own right. And the other thing
Yeah.
with that is like,
And
I organize, as a lot of people know. God.
I was just gonna kind of go in on that a little bit more with the fact that it's about having a real conversation for you, right? Like that's the focal point, and not so much as interviewing the person as marking off each question on a checklist.
Yeah. Yeah. And so one of the things as a coach that I've done is, I can plan a coaching session, but I think it's really important to not stay attached to that plan. It's super important to kind of like be okay with throwing it all out and having the conversation that presents itself. And so, you know, with the structure, I have, different segments, and then I have questions underneath those segments. And I, I feel like I'm pretty decent at coming up with questions. And so, like, I've thought about organizing the structure in such that, hey, you've got, your addiction story, let's say. And then maybe it's like, maybe a note of like before, during, and after, or something like that. And then that's all I need. And I can come up with the questions on my own. And it's interesting because like I've thought about doing that, and I don't want to do that starting off with just a random guess that I don't know very well, but I wouldn't mind testing it out with, with like you or someone else that I know that I can carry on a conversation well with. But like there's a little bit of anxiety that comes from like not having all that listed out just as a go-to if the conversation does run dry. And I think that's an unfounded
Yeah.
fear that I have, because you can ask anybody that has ever come in contact with me and ask them if conversation runs out with Zach. And the answer is no. Like 99 out of 100 people will answer absolutely not. Like I don't, that's not something that I struggle with as far as like figuring out how to have proper conversations with people. So going back to authenticity, I think the authenticity gets lost when I go down the series of questions that I have and ask those, rather than
Yeah.
just going with the flow and asking the questions that come to my head.
Yeah,
And
like I'm
so,
thinking about it too, is like if you don't have prepared questions, doesn't that force you to get to know the person more deeply?
yeah, to an extent, there have been times where, I think I think there's specific questions that I really want to make sure that I ask. Like, for example, what keeps you rolling forward, or the wheelie bad joke segment. Those are deliberate, like, kind of segues, if you will, that like you're right. I don't have to have specific questions necessarily for those, but there are, especially in the wheelie bad joke, no, especially in the what keeps you rolling forward section, there are questions that I really want to deliberately ask in the way that I've planned for that question to be. But that doesn't need to be the entire podcast, like
Yeah, yeah.
I've not done that for the whole podcast. And I shouldn't need to, let's say.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Having planned segments is different than having a whole planned out podcast in that sense, and like
Yeah.
having it curated completely. Like I'm thinking about like Brennan Lee Mulligan has an adventuring party, and they just basically will have conversation, but then there'll be certain segments within that like format where it then goes into, I don't know if this is adventuring party or his like other thing, but he has like a segment where they ask like rapid fire questions, and those
Yeah.
questions are curated, right?
Sure.
I think it's reaction time or something is what it's called. And so I think that with that reminds me a lot of what you're trying to do here in the sense of the really bad joke or like rolling forward. It might be prudent to also have maybe like 3 to 5 questions that you really want to ask a guest, and just have them
Yeah.
like loosely on a paper without any kind of strict order, where like these are things that I really want to ask this person, and then just have a conversation. If it feels like it's hitting a stopping point, that's when you pull out one of these questions.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a great way to go as well, is have like 3 to 5 questions. And normally I think normally I would have 3 to 5 questions that I ask in those segments that I do pull from my notes, right? Like the conversation we just had, there's maybe like maybe 5 questions that I pulled from my notes that I wanted to specifically target and ask you about because I thought they were good questions. Um, but yeah, going back to kind of using it as a crutch, I think it's interesting because like y- 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 there's there's some sort of fear, I guess, of doing it that way and not doing it properly. And it's like, but like I don't have very many viewers. Most of my viewers are friends and family, so it's like okay, what's the harm in testing that out? And you look at so many of the other big podcasts and the authenticity and all that is really there, and especially like the Joe Rogan podcast. Like he doesn't, to my knowledge, he doesn't come with like any notes. Maybe he has something that he's like, yeah, this guest really wants to talk about this, so I'm going to make sure I mention it, and let that person talk about it. But I don't know. I just I it and here's the other interesting thing we were talking about earlier. We were talking about like transparency and just being blunt with each other, right? About things. I
Yeah,
think the majority of people aren't that way. They aren't blunt and would tell me, "Hey, your authenticity is pretty lacking here," or whatever else. I think overall, my authenticity does come out, and I've gotten a lot of great feedback on like how good the flow is and stuff like that. But it's still like I don't know that I can fully trust that person telling me because they want to give me a compliment,
bias.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
So
also more
that's
important than notes is a sense of curiosity.
yeah. Curiosity is definitely something I've been big on. Is is that. But you know, the other thing that I want to make sure that I do, and I've been getting better and better at this, is why should the viewer? What's a takeaway for the viewer? And I'll often ask, hey, if somebody is going through this or knows somebody who's going through this, what advice would you give them? I really like that question. And that's something that I've been
Yeah.
really trying to make an effort to do because I don't want it to be, I do want it to be just a one-on-one conversation or just me and the guests, right? But I really think it's important for there to be takeaways for the viewer, like, or else why are we recording the podcast? You know, it's maybe it's an interesting
Yeah.
conversation and that could be a takeaway, but yeah,
I think the thing that that question made me think of was what was the lesson that I learned? It made me change the
yeah,
perspective that I was thinking about it as well.
yeah. So yeah, I think that's important. I keep going back to my mind being on the viewer and like I don't want this to be them watching a conversation and them being a fly in the wall. I want them to really take it and be like, well, I can apply this in my life, and this was good feedback, or this is a good learning
Yeah.
experience, or this was a good life lesson, or whatever else. So
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So for the next 50, what's your goal? Also, when are you going to have your brother on a podcast?
my brothers are both out of town, so it's a little tricky for that to happen. I'd love to get them in person because I think in
Yeah.
person podcasts are just so much better quality. Um, so so yeah, I think I don't know when, but they both know that like, hey, I want to have them on and hopefully soon. So yeah. So my next 50, you know, for 2026, I've been wanting to have more two guest podcasts, and I think I've been doing that balance pretty
Yeah.
well. Like I still want to have one-on-one conversations, but I really like the dynamic of having two people on at one time. And because because it's not like I always tell people like, "Hey, I don't want this just to be me asking you questions. Feel free to turn it around on me." But most guests don't do that. There are some
Yeah.
that do it, but like having that third person in there can, that person's telling a story and the other guest can be like, "Well, what about this?" And asking that person about that topic and maybe throwing a question that I wouldn't have thought of. So I like that dynamic. Um, I think the big thing with what I want to do is, I want to get through my head thing, my head issues, and then I want to
Yeah.
get through. I want to do more outside of podcast type things and like content outside of the podcast. And do things with the guests and stuff like that could be fun things to help build the brand. I might be getting into a partnership with somebody who is running their own podcast, and we might be doing regular occurrences with together. So I think that'd be cool. It would be fun, and maybe this isn't 6 months, but or the next 50 episodes, but it would be fun to get some sort of like small sponsorship or uh start maybe running out my studio or a bunch of different things. So it'd also be nice to Uh, a lot of people have told me my podcast is too long, which I love the length, and I think the solution to that is breaking it down into smaller segments like
Yeah.
part one, part two, part three. And I just don't have the capacity to do that right now. So
So, what sponsor would you wish for if you could choose any two sponsors?
honestly, like it just has to be a brand that I care about, right? I don't think it really matters as far as what the sponsorship is. Um, like it could be a wheelchair brand or a wheelchair accessory brand, or I do MMA type things. So like any of those types of sponsorships. It could be dude wipes for all I for all I care. Like it's just as long as I use the brand and believe in it, like fine. Like uh yeah.
And do you have any ideas for a 100th podcast?
Yeah. Um if it doesn't happen sooner, I talk a lot about one of my MMA trainer, Rob, and I have like he was the reason, like he was a big catalyst for me starting the podcast, and he was also like, I hear him talk and I think the world needs to hear his message, and I started to observe that in other people as well. I'm like, wow, that's such a great message. Like the world needs to hear that, and they're not. And so my 100th episode, if Rob came on, and maybe him and another guest possibly as well, I could be open to that. But I think 100th episode, and I don't think he even knows this. I'm sure he'd come on for my 100th, but yeah, having him come on for my 100th episode I think would be super cool. And it's interesting because like I will. He's referred a lot of people to me, to come on the podcast, and I will. Uh, I've specifically like asked them about Rob and like what Rob means to them, and he's just made such a positive impact on people's lives. But like the reason I haven't pushed to have him on yet is because I wanted to craft my podcast and really fine tune things so that way I can make it the best possible
Yeah.
episode it can be.
Yeah, I mentioned you telling me that early on that you wanted to master the craft before you had him on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what impact has he made in your life?
I mean, Rob is just a massive encourager. He is someone who cares deeply about the person he is talking to, whether that's me or anybody else that's been in his life. He's built a gym culture where like you can essentially be yourself, and that's such a easy thing to say, is like, I can be myself around this person, but like no, like Rob takes it up another level, and like you can literally tell him anything, and he'll respond accordingly and appropriately, and like nothing like surprises him or shocks him or whatever else. And it's just a cool culture that he's built, and he's just someone that I really respect, and uh I I know a lot of people do. So
That's really cool. I think that that's something that yeah, a lot of people can aspire to be. I'm really interested now in hearing what this podcast will be like. I've heard
yeah.
a lot of praise. There's a lot of hype around this podcast now. Um,
Yeah, it's gonna be like one of those good movies that like someone's like, yeah, you should go see this movie. It's the best movie I've ever seen. And then you go into it with such high expectations that it just turns out to be an okay movie. I don't think that'll happen, but I have built him up a lot on the podcast.
yeah. I mean, it'd just be cool to have a face to the name, you know, for me, who hasn't met him
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah. Yeah. He's this elusive creature at this point.
Yeah, he's like the mythical figure. He's um, if you don't mind though, would you be open to talking about like where you are with your health issues now?
Yeah. So it's been, I don't know, 3 months since I've had my health issues, and a quick synopsis: I was bench pressing, got lightheaded. That lightheadedness never went away. It turns out not to be lightheadedness. I'm having vision problems. I'm having my symptoms get worse with motion and all that. And so where I'm at now is it's still unresolved. I still don't have a clear diagnosis as far as what it is. My symptoms are getting better and better as time goes on, but it's very, very, very slowly. Um, I've had bouts of, depression, lethargy, not really feeling like doing anything other than watching TV, which, I'm not. In the last couple of years, I've not been a big TV watcher, and I've done that a lot because it's like all I can do to you know, to feel okay with my symptoms. So, it's one of those things where it's frustrating not having an answer. And, I just saw my primary care physician, and he looked at me, and he smiled. He goes, "You have a very, very complex case here." And that's basically like I'm baffling the doctors as far as like what's wrong. So I'm gonna list all the doctors that I've seen. So I've seen obviously my primary care physician. I saw a neurosurgeon. I saw a physical therapist. I've seen an ophthalmologist. I've seen an ear, nose, and throat doctor. I've seen I've seen two neurosurgeons. I've seen two ophthalmologists. Uh, and I I'm about to see a neuro-ophthalmologist. I'm about to see a neurologist. Um, I am, oh shoot, what's the hormone doctor that specifically looks at your hormones? Uh, I don't remember what that's called, but anyway, a hormone doctor. I've had MRIs as well. You're trying to think about, I can't think of it. I've had MRIs as well,
I
and
can't think of it either.
those MRIs, yeah, those MRIs have kind of come inconclusive. Like they didn't find anything other than like a Rathke's cleft cyst, which is touching my optic nerve, but they don't think that that is the cause of my problems, because if it was touching my optic nerve in an obtrusive way, I would be having different vision and head issues. So, I've also heard like I have a shunt that pumps fluid out of my brain, and the doctors have said uh, that maybe I need my shunt replaced. The ear, nose, and throat doctor thinks that I might have like a migraine that doesn't come with headaches. I, I, a bunch of different things that the doctors said, and nothing's conclusive. And so I'm still visiting more doctors to try to figure out what's going on. Currently, I am experiencing symptoms. I'd say they're above average currently, but I'm trying not to let that come out in the podcast as far as like my energy level or anything like that. I still want to be me, and I don't want to put bad energy out there. So I think that's a decent update. Feel free to ask me any questions that you have on it.
Yeah, I guess there's kind of a three-parter. How are you dealing with like the unknown and the uncertainty? What is it that you miss the most, and what are you looking forward to when it's finally gone?
Yeah, so I have, excuse me. Um my symptoms get worse with motion, And so I coach and play tennis, and I will go out and play some tennis, but like it's short lived because my symptoms just get worse and I have to stop. And then I am sensitive to light as well, and so I wear sunglasses a lot. My computer, when I'm working my day job, I'm on the computer a lot, and my eyes will hurt. They'll get fatigued, and then throughout the day, I'll get tired, and I just don't have the energy that I used to have, and like yeah, so I'm working on getting back to a normal, even with the symptoms. Like I'm kind of treating it like okay, the symptoms aren't going to go away, push through anyway, which may or may not be healthy. I think for the most part it probably is. I don't think it'll hurt anything, but I was talking with somebody about like, well, what if I just needed to take a month away from everything and kind of give my brain a break, and then that would solve everything. And it's like, yeah, well, what if that's not going to happen, unfortunately, but like maybe that is what I need. I don't know. And so right now it's a lot of shooting from the hip. It's like, okay, well, if I do this, what happens with my symptoms? If I do this, what happens with my symptoms? And so on and so forth. So, I think I'm getting better at managing the symptoms, and it's hard to tell if my symptoms are truly getting better or if I'm just getting better at managing them.
Yeah,
Uh,
that makes a lot of sense.
one interest, one interesting thing, just real quick, that during podcasting doesn't seem to bother my symptoms. But when I shake my head or nod my head like this, like my symptoms do get worse.
Well,
And
don't do
so
it
I have
now.
to, res- I know. I have to respond in different ways. Like I'll smile or like say, yeah, or something like that to engage with the person. And so like, I'm such an animated person that it's hard to be like,
Yeah.
I'll catch myself and not nod my head, and I'll be like, oh, can't do that for very long.
Have you tried like blue lens glasses for the computer issue?
I have sunglasses work better for the computer. I've also it's interesting because I have my mouse, the pointer on my screen like super big. And like when I share my screen to present something, my mouth shows up as that big. And so some of my coworkers have been like, why the heck is your mouth that big? And so that's been, I don't mind talking about it with people. It's not like a personal, a private matter or anything like that. It's not embarrassing. It's just something that I'm going through. And so I'll tell people. I'm pretty open about it. And yeah, like we just had our busy time at work, and like my boss and I were talking about like like possibly taking a leave of absence and stuff like that. And like I was like, listen, my work so far hasn't gotten to the point where I can't do it. But what I have done is I've needed to take breaks and maybe work later on in the day and maybe work some weekends and stuff like that during a busy time. So um that's basically how I've been managing it is, you know, when symptoms do get worse, I step away, and, sometimes I do have to power through still because I have a meeting that I have to prep for, or a deadline or whatever else. So,
So one of the things you're
yeah,
looking forward to is probably just being able to do all the physical activity and engage more in the tennis world again, right? Because you were just really pushing back into it at the point before the triggering incident.
yeah, yeah. And I was creating more shorts too. Like I've set a goal to do at least one a day, and I was creating, two, sometimes three a day before the podcast, and but before the head issues. So yeah,
Talking about shorts, last time we didn't really get into it when we were talking about podcasts. How do you choose what's the right thing for shorts, and what is something you've learned from like analytics, naming a short, just everything you've learned so far?
Yeah. I think when it comes to shorts, a lot of people will talk about the hook, and it's like, what's the what happens in the first 3 seconds is going to determine whether the person swipes away or not. And so creating something that is like, why should they keep watching? I think is super important for shorts. Um, I think it's also I do a lot of disability topics, and one of my favorite types of clips is or shorts is um doing disability like nuanced type things like words, for example, like being on this podcast and talking with people, some people find the word handicap offensive, and I personally don't find it offensive. And so having that conversation, and also like another fun one has been like whether or not businesses should be forced to make their businesses accessible or not. And I lean towards no, and some people lean towards yes. And it's really engaging for the audience on socials because they want to weigh in and put their opinion out. And I love dialogue like that. I love the back and forth of like, I don't think there's one good answer. I think there's a plethora of answers, and I don't think it's going to be ever an answer that is like, yeah, this is perfect and everybody thinks so. So I like having discussions like that on the podcast, and I like creating shorts on that. I also like putting out like any sort of shorts on purpose or uh life lessons, so to speak, quotes. I really like. I probably don't put those out as much, but like if a guest has a quote, I really like putting those out. Um, so I think it's important for me and my podcast to be intentional about the type of shorts that I'm creating. So, like Tuesdays, I have the wheelie bad jokes, and I think that's important for regular guests to look forward to a wheelie bad joke on a Tuesday, right? And making sure that it's consistent with. Oh, it's consistent week to week, so that way people can look forward to it. I don't know that that's been like a research that I've like fully like been like, yeah, there's a science behind it. It just makes sense to me. Um,
Yeah.
so that's that. I'm just being intentional about shorts. I do have a few days where it's like, whatever short that I find that I think will be good, like we can put that out. But I do have ones that are like a purpose focused day, or like a life skills day, a disability day, stuff like that. So
Yeah, I think especially from like the TV days, we're trimmed towards a schedule and having things,
yeah.
released on a set time frame. So I would like to do a little spin-off of reaction time with you, where I'm just going to ask you a series of
Okay.
questions and you just answer whatever comes to your mind immediately, or you can pass as well if you don't want to answer a question. The lag is
Okay.
probably going to make this a little bit difficult, but we'll try and get through this. What subject did you thrive in at school, and which did you fail at?
Thrived at math and science. Did not do very well with English.
Okay. What do you fear the most?
That's a interesting question. I think me in my 20s would have said failure, but I've changed my mindset to embrace that. I don't know that I have something that I specifically fear. Maybe not being a valuable person to society. Like I think that's really important to me.
Can relate to that. For me, I think it's more mediocrity. If you could have it your way, who would you be with? Where would you be? And what would you be doing
Like right now,
right now?
Um, Sorry, can you repeat the question? I really want to process that.
If you could have it your way, who would you be with? Where would you be? And what would you be doing?
This is a bit of vulnerability here. I've always talked about finding a significant other and like having, the conventional family of like settling down and having a wife and kids and stuff like that. And um, I have not put a lot of effort into that part of my life, but I would love to have a partner that I can build something with and um, start a life together and do things that we're both passionate about together. And I think it's the other interesting thing is like I'm at the point in my life where I just don't want to go out to a bar and hang out. I want to
Yeah.
build something with somebody, and it's just one of those things where it almost doesn't matter the person per se, as long as we have that commonality of building together. Like I want to build stuff with people.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Ladies, if you're looking for a good guy, here he is. Get in the comments.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, this is interesting. Why do you think we met?
Why? Interesting.
Yeah.
It's always the how that we talked about with that. Um, I'm not one who thinks everything happens for a reason, but I do think reasons happen for the things that happen to us. If that makes any sense at all. And so like I don't think we were destined to like meet, but I think we took what we have and have formed and shaped something awesome from it, if that makes
I
any
see.
sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I do think there is, for like the bigger things do happen for a reason. But I also think it's on you as the person that it's happening to derive those reasons. Like, for example, me being disabled and why I'm disabled and stuff like that. Like it's not the best thing in the world to have happened to me, but man, I've had some great experiences as a result of it, right?
Yeah. What is a compliment you wished you received more frequently?
That's so funny that you asked that. We were kind of talking about this earlier. Like I don't I want I wouldn't mind compliments, but in the compliment, I want a criticism. Like I think that's almost the best compliment that you can that you can have that you can give me is like, hey, your podcast is awesome, but if you did this, it would make it that much better. Like those are the kinds of compliments that I want to hear because like if you just tell me that my podcast is great, like I am a year in, not even a year in, and you telling me my podcast is great means absolutely nothing to me because I know that it can be improved. Like it's one of those things that like I'm a year old baby in the podcast world and you're telling this baby that they're great. And it's like, no, I don't believe you. I just don't believe you. What can I do better with my podcast to make it even greater? Like it's fair, let's say the podcast, but it's not great. It's just not. Like let's live in reality here.
I I have this really vivid image of you as like a baby with a diaper on and someone being like, "You're doing so great," and you're just like, "The diaper's full of poop. I'm not doing great." Have you ever checked an ex's phone for evidence?
No, I don't think so. It's interesting because I've been listening to a lot of people like on YouTube read Reddit stories, and I
Me
think
too.
if you suspect, yeah, have you really? That's awesome.
Yeah.
But
Way too many.
but I think if you are checking your partner's phone for for something that you think that they're doing, like cheating on you or something like that, that trust in that relationship is already gone or very, very, very bad. And if you're doing that, then I don't know, like it almost seems like the relationship's over at that point. Like how do you
Yeah.
come back even if there's nothing on their phone? You can, no matter what, you can justify it with, oh, well, they deleted messages or they're hiding this on their on another Facebook account or whatever else. Like you can always, if you suspect something, you checking their phone isn't going to be foolproof, even if you don't find anything, and you're always going to have doubts. So it's really important to explore why you have those doubts. And if you
Yeah.
still, after exploring, have those doubts, maybe you should end it, you know?
Yeah. I cannot agree more. Um, yeah. Well, I'm not being asked that question, so I don't need to say anything. What question were you most afraid to answer? Wait, we're gonna do that at the end. We're gonna move that question back.
Okay.
If MySpace were still a thing, what would your profile song be?
They see me rolling.
They hate it. All right. Are you lying to yourself about anything?
Yeah, I'm sure I am.
Well, that's the question. You don't have to say what.
All right, moving on.
If we were in a band, what would our name be?
Wheels and the Leg Man. No, that's an American Dad reference, I believe. And that'd be a funny band. Did we have another name that was even better?
Not one that I can think off the top of my head.
All right, well that's what it would be. It has to be some sort of, it has to be some sort of joke about the wheelchair and all that. Like I love the wheelchair humor, so
All right, wheels in the leg man it is. How can you become a better person?
getting rid of this head issue that I'm having. Um no, I think it's really about even with this head issue, it's about consistency. Like, doesn't matter how I'm feeling, doesn't matter how much sleep I got last night, doesn't matter, where I am. It's so important to stay consistent and keep going.
Yeah, I think that's also by far my biggest struggle in life. Wild card, admit something.
Admit something. Man, I I don't I don't have anything. Um
You have nothing to admit.
nothing to admit. Not that I don't know. Not no. Nothing that comes to mind, and I'm not even thinking of something that I don't want to admit to publicly. um, here's an interesting one. Um, when I was younger, we had two different sizes of forks, and I have siblings, and for some reason, the longer fork was one that everybody wanted for dinner, and the smaller fork nobody wanted, and so I think, I don't think it started with me, but I know that I did it, was when our siblings got the bigger fork, we would like secretly lick the fork and then put it back down and give it to them.
Well, that definitely qualifies. What would your younger self not believe about your life today?
Cool. My younger self was a dreamer. I still am a dreamer, right? But um, I, as a younger self, I thought I'd have, a wife and kids at this point. Uh, I also wanted to be a Paralympian in like 3 different sports. And I've chosen a different direction at that point. It's like a kid saying that they want to be an astronaut when they grow up and not liking math or science,
Yeah.
so they choose a different direction. It's kind of one of those things. So that and I don't know. Well, I grew up in the 90s, and so internet really wasn't around. So like being surprised, I think younger self would be surprised that like I have a podcast and I've kept consistent at it and stuff like that. So
What do you think your defining characteristic is?
that's a good one. There's multiple different directions I could take, but I think positivity.
I like that. What are you still trying to prove to yourself?
That I can be the person that I want to be, that my own thoughts are basically my only limitations to becoming that. Um, I think and I've talked about this before, but ADHD really defined me, and finding the balance between like my own actions and holding myself accountable and blaming it on the ADHD where was a blurred line. And I think, for the most part, I've thrown out the, hey, that action is ADHD, and said, no, that action is me. And that's been a huge game changer because I can control me. I cannot control some disability, some mental disability that I have, you know?
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think like limiting beliefs is it's a huge thing. Wait, nope, I'm not going into this. We're going to the next question. Who do you think your celebrity crush, or who is your celebrity crush?
Who is my celebrity crush? Man, I don't really pay much attention to celebrities. Um, just because like I don't really follow all of that. Like I don't really idolize many many people. Celebrity crush, um, Anna Kendrick, the Cup Song girl. I think, back in the day it was like, oh, she's adorable. We'll go with that.
What most surprised yourself about yourself?
Man, these are interesting questions. I feel like I need like a couple days to think about some of these because like coming up with them like on the
Nope, you got
cuff
right now.
is kind of hard. I know, and I think I'm saying this to filler so that I can think about something. I don't know. Uh, what
I
what
see you.
surprised me? Yeah, what surprises me about myself? I don't know that this surprises me, but like I have I'm a very stubborn person, and you know I think 10 years ago, if you would have asked if I would have been able to do a podcast and maintain it for a year, I would have said absolutely not. So I, I'm thrilled that I've been able to do that.
Hell yeah. What question were you most afraid to answer?
None. I don't really get scared for questions. I can dodge them if I need to, and there wasn't any that I wanted to deliberately dodge. So
Yeah, you didn't use pass once. Very nice. And that is our version of reaction time. Now I gotta play 52 card pickup after this. It was fun throwing those cards around though. I'm not gonna lie.
yeah, it was fun to watch you. Uh, Okay, so let's go back to you, and I think the last thing that we'll get into is the books that you're writing. So you have you have two. Well, you tell me the books that you've been writing. So take it wherever you want.
Oh no, maybe you tell me. Um All right, so there is the Lucid series. I think the only time I've really talked about Lucid was in the like unreleased podcast, or the one that is maybe on Spotify now, the one where there was no video. That's essentially a franchise, and at this point I'm working with friends.
I had not put that out, is what I was going to say. Sorry, there's a big lag.
We were talking about this earlier, and I was like, the idea that me working on my first like novel or like series and starting immediately with the idea of Lucid, which is a full franchise, is like someone sitting down and being like, I'm gonna work on my first story ever, let's make Marvel. And just like all of Marvel as your first project is maybe a bit ambitious. And so this is the thing that I've learned essentially. Um, a lot of shit happened in my life in quick succession. I started writing this book. Loose title right now is, if we're being honest, it's just the working title. It was what I just wrote down as a title because I knew I wanted to write something down that was honest. I started writing this book essentially as just vomiting on a page about everything that was going on. As I started writing the book, more and more ideas started coming around. It started like crystallizing about what kind of story I'm actually telling, what is the structure of the book, how do I want to line the chapters. um Short elevator pitch: guy dies at the beginning of the book, his soul wakes up in limbo, he goes on a journey through 7 past lives, which each are loosely based around like a sin and a virtue, so like sloth and drive, or like lust and chastity. um Goes through those, at the end is faced with a choice. um but it's kind of just a space for me to process, examine, dissect thoughts. It started out as something more mythical, which is very like dreamlike in the first 2 chapters. Excuse me. From chapter 3 to 7, it is a lot more slice of life. It's like short story esque. So now I'm trying to marry those two ideas, because in the beginning it was all supposed to be very dreamlike. And then as I was like crafting these other chapters, I was kind of world building and writing the stories as one. And so those chapters are more just like, yeah, very short story format. Um, there's a main character that goes through trials and tribulations, either in the course of like a portion of their life or their whole life. And it has less of that dreamlike quality. um it's been so much easier to write, because with Lucid there's like hundreds of characters, there's a whole timeline, there's this interwoven plot with different factions and things going on. That whole series is based around a drug that essentially grants people the like superpowers, but it also like brings their physical and their dreamlike selves together. So there's like 2 worlds. There's the mortal plane with everything going on, but then there's also like a dream world that they're exploring with like almost like more primordial elements to it. And yeah, there's like mysteries, and there's intrigues, and there's conspiracies, and there's adventure. And it is truly, I believe, in a large part of me, like that is the reason why I'm on this planet, is to write that story. Um, it like all of me wants to write that story, but that also means I want it to be perfect. And so setting out to just write a book has finally broken that perfection seal, where it's like I'm just writing it, and it could be crap, it could be great, doesn't matter. It's just going to be whatever it is, and I'm going to write it. And like part of me hopes that like I'll win a Pulitzer, and part of me thinks it's going to be the worst thing ever made. But either one is fine, because then I'll have finally written a book. because I've written thousands of
Yeah.
songs,
Heck
I've
yeah.
written short stories, but I've never sit down and finished a book. And so that has just been the goal. I got the draft done. Now editing is a whole new thing that I haven't really had so much experience when it comes to literature. Um, it's been a fun but also scary process at times. Um, I'm getting a little too artsy with it at certain points. Like the first chapter, I'm playing around with the format and different things. Um, but I think it's just really important that I finish something because that will take away the weight
Yeah.
of whatever the first book of Lucid will be, and it's proof of concept that I to myself that I can write a book, which is something I've wanted to do forever. And I have all these ideas also for other books and stories, but the act of actually putting it on the page is scary because it goes from being every possibility that it could ever be, from all the amazing, perfect stories that it could be, to just whatever it is. And that transmutation process is terrifying for me as an author because what if it's worse than I think it will be?
Yeah. I love that. What when can people what's their timeline? When can people expect to read it?
So going back full circle to our challenges, I mean, easy challenge for me is just working out every day. Middle challenge is applying to some more jobs, getting a new job, and the challenging challenge is finishing the draft or the like getting a finished version of this book by the next podcast. So
Yeah.
shooting for the next 2 to 3 months.
Love that.
Obviously, then I need to figure out publishers and stuff like that, or like how I'm gonna go about presenting it. Maybe just a video of an audiobook or something. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I mean, I guess we can segue into challenges as well. I stopped. I stopped doing all my OMAD stuff and like my eating healthy and working out and all that. So I really need to go back to square one with my goals and kind of start, fairly simple, but also, challenge myself a little bit. So I think my first goal is to get back into, and this is maybe not specific enough, but my first goal is to get back into the eating and working out routine that I was in, or maybe not what I was in before, because my symptoms could be bad if I work out too much, but like some semblance of working out more regularly and also eating healthier on a regular basis. So getting back on that bandwagon, I think the eating one is going to be a lot easier because that's not going to exacerbate my symptoms. So that one meal a day with unlimited veggies and whatnot throughout the day, I think is one. And then avoiding any sort of processed foods and all that. So and then working out. I'd like to get back into working out 2 to 3 days a week outside of tennis. So that is, I don't know, probably a medium goal, and maybe we can loop both the eating into the easy goal, and then the working out into the a little bit harder medium goal. And then
Yeah,
the hard goal, the hard goal, I haven't hashed this out, and again, a vulnerability, and one of the reasons, by the way, that I wanted to do this segment on a podcast with you is because I think it's important to pick ones that we could potentially fail at, right? And then talk about our learning experiences for why we failed and how we can make sure that we don't fail next time, or testing things out to see if a different way of going about it works better and stuff like that. So I've gained probably like 15 pounds while I've not been doing any sort of like diet and exercise. So I'd like to get back on that weight loss train and start anew from that. But the other vulnerability thing is like, I don't know, like this is really hard for me to put out on the onto the internet, but like start dating again. And I think the reason why it's hard for me to put out there is because I haven't been taking a lot of action in my life around that, and I almost don't want to be held accountable to that. But I think that's probably the big one is like, you know, a date, a date or two, and all that. So
Ladies, you heard it. Get in the comment.
it's also hard because I don't want to commit to doing more while I'm doing these head things. Maybe that's the hard one, and then we can revisit the dating one later. Is getting closer to resolving my head issues. I think that's the hard one. Continuing with the progress of seeing doctors and ruling things out and all that.
I think though it's a very natural thing. I understand your hesitation of putting it out on like a podcast and out on the internet, but I think it's so natural for people to want to love and be loved, right? I mean, besides like the biological and the chemistry parts of it, it's one of the things that makes life worth living. I mean, when I was dating this last girl, every step seemed a little bit easier. Every morning was just a little bit easier to get up. Every night was a little easier to fall asleep. Everything was a little bit brighter. Food tasted a little bit better. Life was just a little bit more bright, right? And when you're alone, sometimes, especially as a man, and you're pushing through things and you're working hard and you're doing everything, and you just stop and think, like, what am I doing this for? What's the purpose? Like, who am I doing
Hmm.
this for? You know,
Yeah,
just for me? And it can get sad and it can get lonely, but like that's also when you gotta learn to love yourself, enjoy the little moments, and appreciate the people around you. And I think the rest fall into place.
I don't think I'm losing sight of like who am I doing this for? Like I don't think if I got settled down, it's like, oh, I'm doing all this stuff for this person, but it's more that companionship, I think.
Yeah, I feel that. Well,
So anyway, that's our goals. What goals do you have, person watching this? Let us know in the comments, and maybe the next time Alex and I talk, you can update us on how you've done. So
you
I'd
got two
really like to
months.
start like a community of,
2 months.
yeah, I'd really like to start a community of like accountability and following up with each other. And if we can do it using this podcast as a metric, that'd be awesome. So okay, well, I think we've gone for a little bit over, probably under 3 hours with all the stepping away and all that. But I think we're good to close. What do you
I think
think?
we're at 4. I think we're at 4 hours.
I'm showing what I'm showing we're at 3 on the
We had
time.
126, then another 126, and then we had a 30-minute segment too.
Uh, okay,
I
interesting.
might be tripping. I might be
Uh,
tripping. This seems like a good point to jump off, though.
yeah.
Three
Well,
to four, who
everybody,
cares?
thank you. Yeah, everybody, thank you for joining the Rolling Forward podcast. If you like what you heard, hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. I want to hear what keeps you rolling forward. Anything that stuck out to you in this episode, something you learned, something you took away from it. I want to hear that in the comments. Let us know. And if you think this episode would be an awesome one for a friend or family member to listen to, please share. It really helps me out as far as growing the channel. And then Yeah. The last thing, I am wearing the Rolling Forward podcast branded shirt. If you want to get one of these, you can go on rollingforward.printful.me, pick yourself up a copy. And I'd love to, if you have any ideas for what should go in the store, let me know. And until next time, keep rolling forward. Thanks, everybody.